smeared on some sap, and retreated to a safe distance, indicating for him to pull his tunic back on. "How much longer do you have to stay here tonight?" Jaren asked, his gaze wandering around the infirmary. She tried to see it from his perspective. The metal benches, the wooden work table covered with supplies, the thin blanketed pallets with even thinner privacy curtains for patients who needed longer care. At the back of the room was a closed door leading into the quarantine room, currently occupied by a few cases of a stomach virus that was going around. "A couple more hours," Kiva answered. "Alicia and Nergal will come and take over when it's time for me to sleep." Unlike many of the other prisoners, Kiva's hours were extensive. Most laborers worked for 12 hours, sometimes 14. But as the prison healer, it wasn't unheard of for her to work 18 hours a day, especially when there were wagon loads of new arrivals. Alicia and Nergal, the two others who were allocated to the infirmary, shared the skeleton shift each night, but the rest of the time, they were shuffled among different administrative tasks depending on where they were needed. Unless Kiva was desperate for added support during the day, the three of them rarely worked together, which was perhaps another reason why the two older prisoners were so incompetent. They had no one to teach them how to treat the more complicated health concerns. "Here," Kiva said, retrieving a small jar of aloe gel from her supplies and handing it to Jaren. He turned it between his fingers. "What's this?" "It's for your hands," she said. "You should have come to see me about them sooner." Jaren cocked his head to the side. "Is that your way of saying you missed me?" Kiva felt her eye twitch. "It's my way of saying they'll only get worse if you don't look after them." "Fair point," Jaren said, with the hint of a smile. "And I guess we don't know each other well enough for you to miss me yet." Another eye twitch. "There's no need to add yet to the end of that. We'll never know each other that well." Jaren's mouth hitched up into a crooked grin. He jumped down from the bench, the move bringing him much closer to Kiva. Her instinct was to step back, but she didn't want to give him the satisfaction, so she remained in place. "Maybe if you..." Whatever Jaren had been about to say was interrupted when Tip bounded through the unguarded door and into the infirmary. "Kiva, did you hear?" "Hear what?" she asked, spinning toward him. "There's a new arrival." "What? Now?" Kiva said, frowning. Not only was it still the dead of winter, but it was also nighttime. Never in Kiva's 10 years of imprisonment had a new inmate been delivered so late. "Yes, and you won't believe who they're saying she is." Before Kiva could ask, Nari appeared at the entrance to the infirmary, her face tight. Close behind her came two other guards, both male, carrying a stretcher upon which was what looked like a bundle of oddly shaped rags in the vague outline of a human. "Out of the way, boy," one of the guards snarled at Tip, who quickly scampered toward where Kiva and Jaren stood. "You, healer," the second guard barked at Kiva as they unceremoniously dragged the limp weight of the ragged-clothed human off the stretcher and onto the metal bench Jaren had vacated. "You have a week before she's to face her first trial. We want a good show, so do what you can to fix her before then." And then the two male guards took off into the night, one of them giving Tip a forceful shove as he walked by, prompting Kiva to dig her fingernails into Jaren's forearm to keep him from lunging after the man. She shook her head firmly at him, and the stormy look on his face darkened before he let out a sigh and moved to ruffle Tip's hair. The young boy was nowhere near as upset as Jaren. A shove was the least of what the guard could have done, and Tip knew it. Leaping into action, Kiva approached the unconscious woman, listening in as Jaren asked, "What did he mean about a trial?" To Kiva's surprise, it was Nari who answered, having remained behind when her fellow guards departed. "This woman has been sentenced to undertake the trial by ordeal." Kiva, who had been reaching for the rags obscuring the new arrival's face, froze and spun back to look at the guard. Jaren, too, was staring at Nari with incredulity, though there was also something else in his expression, something Kiva didn't know him well enough to read. Noting their reactions, Tip asked, "What's a trial by ordeal?" No one spoke. "Guys, what's going on?" Tip demanded. "What's this trial thing?" Kiva slowly turned from Nari to the young boy and said, "The trial by ordeal is only ever sentenced to the most dangerous of criminals. The last time it happened was something like 20 years ago." 30, Jaren said, his features tense as he looked toward the unconscious woman that Kiva remained frozen above. But what is it?" Tip asked. 4 elemental tasks, called ordeals, to determine a person's guilt. Trial by air, trial by fire, trial by water, trial by earth. Jaren answered, as if reading from an archive. If the person survives, they're deemed innocent. If Kiva hadn't been so shocked by the woman's sentence, she might have questioned the origin of Jaren's knowledge. She herself had heard whispers throughout her years at Zalendov, legends of prisoners who had received the unforgiving sentence, but she'd known nothing of the trials prior to her arrival. "Elemental tasks?" Tip's forehead was bunched. "But only the royal family has elemental magic these days." "The tasks might be inspired by magic of old," Jaren continued sharing, "but it's said that if a person is truly innocent, they'll be able to make it through the 4 ordeals without needing any kind of power." "So, if this woman does these trials, she'll be able to leave Zalendov free?" Tip asked, looking awed by the thought, as if he wished it for his own future. "No one has ever survived the full trial by ordeal, Tip," Kiva broke in softly. "1 or 2 of the tasks, maybe. Just enough to lull them into a false sense of security, but never all 4. She whispered to finish, "It's a death sentence." Jaren nodded grimly in agreement. Tip paled, then looked toward the unconscious woman. He bit his lip and said, "I guess that makes sense, if she really is who they think she is." Kiva finally unfroze her fingers to remove the cloth from the new arrival's face. "Who do they think she is?" It was Nari who answered as Kiva drew the rags away, revealing the woman's features. "It's believed that she's Tilda Quarantine," the guard said, "the rebel queen." Kiva's heart stopped as she stared down at the middle-aged woman. Straight nose, thick lashes, dark hair and brows. Her tanned skin had an unhealthy tinge to it, and when her eyes opened for a brief second before fluttering shut again, they were milky white. The woman was blind, and, with her both shivering and sweating at once, it was clear that she was very ill. All of this Kiva took in within the space of half a breath, because that was how long it took for the shock to hit her. King Stellan and Queen Ariana want to make an example out of her, Nari went on, especially since she was captured while recruiting more followers in Miraven, and Avalon doesn't have an extradition treaty with them, given the tenuous relationship between our 2 kingdoms. The best the king and queen could do was petition to have her sent here, where justice could be served, even if it meant they couldn't interrogate her beforehand. Nari looked at the sick woman, though, in this state, I doubt she would have been able to reveal anything, even if they'd been able to intercept her before arrival. Kiva was having trouble drawing air into her lungs. This blind, sick woman, the most wanted person in Avalon, was now in Kiva's care. The rebel queen. And not only that, but... What's this? Tip's voice drew Kiva back from her panicked thoughts. She spun to find him plucking something from the ground, a small scrap of parchment. I think it fell out of her blanket when they moved her off the stretcher, he said, unfolding the parchment and squinting at it. He turned it on its side, then upside down, and a sinking feeling hit Kiva's stomach. Let me see, she said, her voice croaking slightly in the middle. It's nothing, just some doodles, Tip decided, but he handed it over as requested. Kiva's heart rate skyrocketed as she saw the familiar coded symbols and translated what they said. The message was clear. Don't let her die. We are coming. Kiva's breath caught as those final 3 words repeated in her mind. We are coming. We are coming. We are coming. No longer a vague promise of one day, but imminent. Her family was coming. Finally, after waiting so long, they were coming. For Kiva, but also for Tilda. They were coming for the rebel queen. Kiva swore inwardly. The woman might very well not last the night, and even if she did. For 10 years, Kiva had followed her coded orders, but for the first time ever, she had no idea how to do what she was told, because even if she could save Tilda from her illness, there was no way to keep her from her fate. Her death was coming, one way or another, and there was nothing Kiva could do about it.